Becoming more. Seeing the world at an early age radically changed the boy known as Ash Ketchum. Ash Ketchum's mother, Delia Ketchum, loved to travel almost as much as she loved her own beloved son. She traveled abroad as much as she could, usually with friends and family, visiting all kinds of interesting places to experience their charms and to learn the local people's customs. When a far-off place inevitably caught her attention, she always vowed to visit it within a year's time. Of course, the moment her son entered her life she slowed down some and stayed at home more in order to take care of her child, but the moment she deemed him old enough to travel, which was around 5 years old for the small Ash Ketchum, she once again went abroad as much as she could. Taking her child with her, of course. The pair visited places all over the world like Goldenrod City in the Johto region, Lilycove City in the Hoenn region, Sunnyshore City in the Sinnoh region, Opelucid City in the Unova region, Lumiose City in the Kalos region, and even regularly visiting places all over the Kanto region, to name a few. Ash Ketchum learned to love traveling just as much as his mother. He was a curious young boy that loved nothing more than to travel alongside his mother to new and interesting places where he could meet exciting new people and Pokémon. In the years before he even set out on his Pokémon journey he had already seen a lot of the world and had met many a people and Pokémon thanks to his mother's love for traveling. He had indeed seen a lot of the world at his young age, but there were 3 places that had left the greatest mark on the boy that would, in the end, change the child into something more. Ash Ketchum, age 7. Sinnoh region, Alamos Town. Alamos Town wasn't really a town, it was more the size of a small city than anything else. The main part of the city sat on top of a large mesa with steep hillsides in the middle of a lake. A large bridge connected the mesa to the mainland where thousands of tourists would cross over every day. The city's most iconic feature is the massive and beautiful structure known as the space-time towers that pierced into the sky and could be seen for miles around. Ash and Delia Ketchum walked down a dirt road hand in hand, coming closer and closer to the mesa that held Alamos Town. Both mother and son were excited to visit the city and could hardly wait to see it in all of its glory. Both sucked in a deep breath as they crested the hill they were walking and got a stunning view of the beautiful city. The sunlight caught the city at just the right time to frame its beauty. Wow! Ash breathed out in awe as he looked at the steep hillsides of the mesa in the center of a crystal-clear lake. The beautiful and artistic structures of the city towered into the sky on top of the mesa, which was reflected upside down on the surface of the blue lake. His mother was equally as awed by the sight. She stood frozen on the spot. Her mouth was half open and her eyes roamed hungrily over the image in front of her, trying to take it all in. Mommy, Ash said as he tugged at his mother's jeans. How are we going to get there? He questioned, realizing that there was no path for them follow to the city. Ash could see a massive bridge in the distance that went over the lake to the city, but it was on the other side of the lake and quite far away. His mother's eyes widened and she took out her travel guide. Flipping the thin book open she quickly saw what was wrong. She sighed. It looks like we're on the wrong shore. And I'm exhausted, Ash complained, sagging forwards as he let his tiny arms dangle to the ground. He was not looking forward to walking around the lake and up and down the hills to get to the bridge. Me too, but we don't have a choice. Would you two like a lift? A voice suddenly interrupted his mother. Ash looked around but didn't see anyone. Suddenly, a shadow came over him and his mother. The pair looked up and were surprised to see a hot air balloon descending towards them. A young blonde-haired woman with a chimchar on her shoulder was in the balloon and waved at them as she and her chimchar shouted greetings. It didn't take long for Ash and his mother to agree and board the hot air balloon, taking their places in the basket. They took off quickly again, taking to the sky as Chimchar used flamethrower to heat up the air in the balloon and for the woman to steer the balloon directly towards Alamos Town. We can't thank you enough for your kindness, Delia said gratefully, smiling at the young woman who had taken the time to help her and her son. I'm Delia and this is my son, Ash. What's your name? I'm Alice, the blonde introduced herself and smiled at Ash and his mother. Above them her Chimchar breathed another flamethrower into the balloon, making it climb up in the air even higher and making it go faster. Awesome. We're moving really fast, Ash said excitedly, peering over the basket's ridge. What a pretty lake, Delia commented as she looked at the pristine lake that was speeding down beneath them. Hey, Alice. Do you do this often? Giving people balloon rides, I mean. Ash suddenly questioned, his eyes wide with childish innocence. Well, I work part-time as a hot air balloon tour guide, but I spent the most of my time as a music student, Alice said brightly as she took out a small leaf from her pocket and placed it against her mouth as she started playing her favorite song, Oración. Delia raised an eyebrow. A leaf whistle. Delia completely forgot about her question as the beautiful melody of Oración reached her ears. It was a calming and beautiful sound that immediately put her at ease. Ash had sagged slightly as the melody coming from the leaf whistle calmed his excitable nature and made him relax. Suddenly, two flocks of Pelipper, Pidgey and Pidgeotto came flying besides the hot air balloon, drawn in by the melody. The Pokémon chirped at Alice, thanking her for the music. Alice continued playing. The flying types chirped at her one more time in thanks before taking off again. You see. The Pokémon are showing me the air currents, Alice said brightly. Come on, Chimchar. Her Pokémon nodded at her and angled its head up. It breathed another flamethrower up into the balloon, heating up the air and making the balloon go even faster towards Alamo's town. Look at those towers. Ash said excitedly, looking at the famous space-time towers that arched into the sky, dominating the city's skyline. Here, listen to this, Delia said, taking out her travel guide from her backpack again. She flipped it open and read. The brilliant architect Goethe designed the space-time towers 100 years ago. And that's where we also hold our Pokémon contests, Alice informed them, smiling brightly. What's a Pokémon contest? Ash asked, his head cocked to the side in interest. Oh, a Pokémon contest is a competition where people known as coordinators show off the beauty of their Pokémon and their skills in battle in order to win a ribbon. Similar to how ordinary trainers try to win badges from gym leaders, Delia informed her child as she smiled at his inquisitive nature. Ash nodded at the explanation and looked interested. Alice gave them a tour over the city, free of charge, and showed them everything the fine city had to offer. Taking the most time to showcase the famous space-time towers and the beautiful Alamo's town park while sharing interesting tidbits of knowledge about both iconic features of the unique city. It was not long afterward that Alice landed her hot air balloon and gave the excited mother and son duo a land tour through the city, making sure to visit the space-time towers during the tour and ending it at the Alamo's town park. Delia clapped her hands together in delight. Okay, it's about noon now. How about a picnic? She said brightly, looking at the beautiful and artistic scenery of the Alamo's town park. The perfect place for a picnic, she thought. Ash cheered. Yay, a picnic. Alice giggled at him. Suddenly, her stomach growled loudly. The pretty blonde blushed as Delia and Ash looked at her with amusement. Mind if I join you? Delia's smile told Alice everything that she needed to know. Sure, the more the merrier. The mother took out a blanket from her backpack and laid it down on the soft grass. Ash sat down on it as his mother took out their food, a few sandwiches, salads and different kinds of pastas and side dishes, and placed them on a few neatly arranged plates. Alice took out her own food from her own backpack and joined the mother and son on the blanket for a nice and quiet picnic, which was rather remarkable considering Ash was present. During the picnic, Ash's eyes were drawn to a group of Pokémon that had suddenly appeared from the bushes. A Shinx, an Azurill, a Marill, an Azumarill and a Luxio. The Pokémon cried out in delight when they spotted Alice and promptly tackled the surprised woman, nearly knocking over the dishes. Oh, hey you guys, how's it going? The music player righted herself and smiled at her Pokémon friends as she petted them, giving them attention one by one. Alice spotted the questioning look in Ash's and Delia's eyes and answered the unasked question. I've been playing in these gardens since I was a little girl. These are some of the friends I have made here. Say hi to Delia and her son, Ash, everyone. The water-type Pokémon waved at the mother and son duo with their stubby arms and cried out their names, greeting them. The Shinx and Luxio nodded at them, polite smiles stretching over their faces. Suddenly, the small Azurill lost its balance and fell down, falling on the rim of one of the dishes with pasta on it, sending it flying and striking a surprised Luxio in the face, covering it completely. The other Pokémon laughed, while the Azurill looked sheepish. Ash's shoulders shook in silent laughter while Delia and Alice had raised their hands to their mouths, hiding their smiles. Luxio did not find it funny and promptly tackled the nearest laughing Pokémon, the Azumarill, and knocked it over. The other Pokémon quickly moved to break the two Pokémon up but got shocked for their efforts as Luxio used Thunderbolt in anger. Mayhem followed. The situation developed into an all-out brawl between the 5 Pokémon. The Shinx and Luxio were shocking the living daylights out of the water types while the water types in turn blasted them with water guns and ice beams. In between this chaos, Ash and Delia were trying to get away from the blast zone, crawling over the ground in order to evade the stray thunderbolts, water guns and ice beams arching over their heads. They didn't have to bother. Suddenly, the soothing tones of Oracion washed over the clearing, instantly calming down the wild Pokémon and stopping their battle. Ash and Delia looked in awe at Alice, who was still sitting calmly on the blanket with her legs folded under her as she played on her leaf whistle. The Shinx and Luxio settled down on the ground, their eyes closed in contentment and their ears dropping as they almost fell asleep from the sweet tones of Oracion. The Azurill fell asleep instantly, making the now calm and content-looking Azumarill catch the sleeping baby Pokémon. The Marill walked off, found a comfortable place in the grass, curled up and fell asleep. Alice stopped playing her leaf whistle and smiled. That was awesome. Ash nearly shouted, looking at Alice in undisguised awe. Why thank you, she accepted the praise gracefully. Can you teach me how to do that? The boy asked excitedly. You want to learn how to play music? Alice asked, surprised. It wasn't every day that 7-year-old children decide that they want to learn how to play music. And certainly not boys. Sure, why not? If music can do that, Ash said, pointing at the sleeping and content-looking Pokémon, who had been fighting only moments ago, then I want to learn it. What's that song called, anyway? Delia suddenly interjected. She was very curious about the song that could have so much effect on humans and Pokémon alike. She was also very pleased that her child wanted to learn something that artistic. She could already see her child becoming a world-famous musician who attracted lots of fans, and girls. The mother quietly giggled to herself. It's called Oracion. My grandmother taught it to me when I was a little girl, Alice said as she took out an old picture from her back pocket. She showed the black and white picture to the mother and son who looked at it curiously. On it were 2 people sitting on a bench in the park, an elderly man with a beard and what looked a young version of Alice. The older man is Godi, the famous architect, and that girl is my grandmother when she was little. She turned the picture around. On the back of it was the symbol of Oracion, 2 heavily decorated intertwined halves of a leaf, and beneath it was the sheet music of Oracion, neatly displayed on decorated lines. Alice smiled at Ash. I'll make you a copy of Oracion and show you how to play on a leaf whistle. But I warn you, it will take some time before you'll be able to play Oracion with any degree of fluency. It's harder than it looks. Don't worry, though. I'm sure you'll be able to learn it. After all, practice makes perfect. Ash nodded, smiling. Some of the words went over his head but he got the gist of what Alice was saying. Alice got up and stretched for a bit. Well, it's still early. How about a visit to the space-time towers? She smiled as she got 2 excited nods for her question. And so, Ash took the first step in becoming something more. 2 weeks later it was time for Ash and his mother to leave and to go back home. Both mother and son had just packed their stuff and had left their hotel. They were about to leave the city, heading for the airport. But first they had to say goodbye to a friend. Alice. I can't believe you're leaving already, the blonde laminated sadly. The 2 weeks had gone by too fast for the music artist. Delia smiled at her friend as she held her child's hand in her own. They were standing on the bridge that led out of the city. Alice and Delia had become fast friends in the 2 weeks that they had been together. The two had met each other daily at the park where Alice taught Ash how to use a leaf whistle and gave him a copy of Oracion. Ash had been practicing every day, and while he had sucked at it in the beginning, he was starting to make progress. It was little, but it was something, and if you could describe Ash as being anything, it would be stubborn. Delia was sure that he would try some more until he got it right. Sad, but true. I'm sure we'll meet again. We like to travel, you see. I'm sure we'll visit here again someday, Delia said, smiling slightly sadly at Alice. There's that. Or maybe I should come and visit you in Kanto, Alice returned, also smiling a sad smile. Oh, I would love that, and I know Ash would like that too. Ash looked sadly at Alice, but he was used to it. He had made many friends with people all over the world and he always had to leave them behind as he and his mother went back home. He still held contact with some of them, though. Alice crouched down and tousled Ash's hair, smiling at the young boy that had warmed her heart with his dedication. He had really surprised her with his determination to learn how to play Oración. Keep on practicing, Ash. And when you come back I want you to play it for me, okay? Alice asked. Ash nodded immediately. He would love to show Alice what he had learned when he came to visit her again. Alice suddenly dipped her head and kissed Ash on the cheek. The boy's face went completely red in an instant. Alice smiled at the embarrassed boy and stood back up after tussling his hair one more time. Delia giggled and held out her hand. Alice took it and said goodbye to the mother and son, winking at the still blushing Ash. She turned around and left, heading back home. The mother and son turned and started making their way across the bridge. Did you have a great time, sweetie? Delia asked as they walked. She already knew the answer but she wanted to hear it from her son's mouth. Ash smiled brightly, his blush having finally abated. I sure did. It was awesome playing with the Pokemon in the park and learning how to play Oración with Alice. The space and time towers were also pretty nice. Delia smiled at her son's excited description. Say, will you play Oración for me? Ash's blush returned full force. Not yet. I want to practice it a bit more. Delia giggled again. She knew that her son's current skill at playing music was more likely to render her deaf than calm her down. Ash Ketchum, age 8. Kanto region, Rota. The kingdom of Rota was a nice place, if a bit plain in Ash's opinion. The people were nice enough and the buildings were decorated like in ancient times, giving the town an old and medieval feel to it. But it was not the town that drew people to the kingdom. No, Rota's claim to fame was Cameron Palace. This ancient palace is famous for its beautiful structures. The palace resided in the middle of a lake on an island with steep hillsides. 2 bridges connected it to the town of Rota that wrapped completely around the gorgeous castle. The Renaissance-style castle had white marble walls that glinted in the sunlight. Blue jagged crystals embedded into the walls added to the dazzling display. White towers pierced into the sky, their sharp blood-red points starkly contrasted with the white and blue theme of the castle. At one end of the castle was a massive drawbridge that thousands of tourists were crossing over. It was this gate that Ash and Delia entered through to the famous castle. Both mother and son were wearing clothes that were worn in ancient times, in the times of the castle's creation. Delia wore a plain white noble woman's dress. She had a jeweled necklace around her neck and her hair had been braided into a stunning hairpiece. Ash, on the other hand, wore a downsized version of a chain-mail-based knight's armor for his small size. It looked comical to a degree, but it fit. Today was a special day, a day of celebration. A festival was being held in honor of the legendary hero that had saved the kingdom of Rota from certain destruction, the famous Sir Aaron. The main event of this celebration was a Pokemon competition. A tournament that trainers have come from far and wide to compete in for the honor to be dubbed Guardian of the Aura. Ash was looking forward to the tournament. Too bad he wasn't a trainer yet or he could have competed himself. Oh, how he would have loved that. Delia looked up at the clock tower of the castle, checking the time. It seems we're running a little late. The tournament is about to begin in 10 minutes. Let's hurry, dear. Ash smiled. Yeah, let's hurry. He cried out in delight. Delia took her child's hand and led him through the throngs of people. She quickly took them to the arena that was tucked away in a spacious corner of the palace. Mentally, she thanked herself for having learned the castle's layout the day before, otherwise they would have gotten hopelessly lost. The duo entered the arena mere moments before the main crowd started making their way to the about-to-be-held tournament. The mother and son ascended a flight of stairs and came to a viewing area, perfect for a bird's-eye view for the battles that were about to be held. They quickly took a place at the front of the stone viewing areas. Ash had to take a small chair to stand on, though, in order to be able to see over the railing. Ash looked out over the arena. Down below was a plain dirt battlefield, one commonly used in big Pokemon competitions like in the league. The stadium was a medieval-style arena with stone viewing areas. There were quite a bit of people in the arena already, Ash noted. The viewing areas were still filling up, but would be full in a few moments. Several minutes later the stadium was full and the competition was ready to begin, heralded by blowing of trumpets. The judge appeared down on the battlefield, clothed in a suitable medieval purple outfit, and made the opening words. Presenting Her Royal Majesty, he boomed, his voice loud and authoritative, the illustrious ruler of Cameron Palace, Lady Eileen. Up on a special balcony overseeing the battlefield at the highest point, Lady Eileen, Queen of Cameron, appeared with a Mime Jr. in her arms. Her maid followed close behind her. The Queen placed Mime Jr. down, who twirled in happiness and copied Lady Eileen's movements as the Queen waved at the public. "Oh, just look at her. She's so beautiful," Delia commented in admiration as she saw the Queen. Ash blinked. Weren't women supposed to be jealous of other beautiful women? Queen Eileen spread her arms wide and smiled at the crowd, Mime Jr. copying her actions again. "And now, in honor of Sir Aaron and his noble deeds, we will begin our annual Pokemon competition." The crowd roared and cheered in approval. That was the starting sign for the tournament to begin. Two trainers came rushing out of the tunnels on either side of the battlefield, fully prepped and fully ready as they threw two Pokeballs up into the air. In two identical flashes of white light, a Gallade and a Sandslash appeared on the battlefield. They glared at each other and tensed for battle. "Begin!" The ref shouted over the roar of the crowd, lowering his flag. The Gallade and Sandslash rushed each other at their trainer's command. Gallade came in swinging with Psycho Cut, its sharp forearms shining a dangerous pink, and Sandslash rocketed forwards with indecent white glowing claws as it used Slash. They met. An explosion lit up the battlefield and raised a gigantic smoke cloud, hiding the Pokemon from sight. The tournament was on. And welcome back after our half-hour intermission. Now that our final two contestants' Pokemon have recovered from their previous battles, the final match of the Cameron Pokemon competition is about to begin. The ref shouted as the crowd once again took their places in the viewing boxes. He raised his flag. The final match between Jason Tramer from Kanto and Candice Lockhart from Hoenn for the beloved title of the Guardian of the Aura, begin. The ref threw down his flag as the last word echoed out over the stadium. The two final contenders took their places on either end of the battlefield, one boy and one girl. Jason, an 18-year-old red-haired young man with deep green eyes and dressed in plated armor of old, hurled his Pokeball into the sky. It released a towering and massive Rhyperior onto the battlefield. Rhyperior roared, its sheer weight crushing the ground underneath the huge Pokemon, and its roar actually released a small shockwave that scattered dirt and dust in all directions. Candice, a 21-year-old blonde-haired woman with light brown eyes and dressed in a flowing, dark blue royal woman's dress, threw her own Pokeball. It snapped open and released a powerful-looking Sceptile. The forest Pokemon proudly raised its head, giving a deep glare at the now silent Rhyperior. Ash immediately knew what this battle was going to be about. Speed versus power. Jason made the opening move. Rhyperior, use Earthquake. Rhyperior grunted in acknowledgement and raised one gigantic foot. Pausing for nary a moment, it stomped the ground with enough force to shake the entire stadium. The ground shook and rippled like water under its immense power. A fissure opened in the ground and went directly for Sceptile. Jump up to evade and then use Leaf Blade. Candice countered as she fought to keep her balance. Sceptile nodded in confirmation. It recovered its balance and jumped into the air with great speed, causing the fissure to harmlessly pass under it. Sceptile threw its arms to its sides, the leaves on both of Sceptile's forearms glowing a dangerous green and elongating, taking the form of a leaf blade. Use Rock Polish and dodge. Then come around with Hammer Arm. Jason commanded quickly. Rhyperior crushed its fists together. Its red-plated armored hide glowed a deep red as it used Rock Polish. With great speed, Rhyperior zipped away from Sceptile's leaf blade attack at the last moment. Circling back around Sceptile, it raised its gigantic right arm, an angry orange energy enveloping it as it used Hammer Arm. Still using its augmented speed, Rhyperior rushed at Sceptiles from behind as the ground shook under its immense weight. A frontal attack. How foolish. Candice taunted with a smirk. Now Sceptile, end this with Frenzy Plant. She commanded. Sceptile turned around to meet Rhyperior head-on. Channeling its power into the ground, dozens of gigantic tree roots suddenly sprouted. They speared high into the sky, growing in size as Sceptile concentrated to make the attack as powerful as possible. Once the tree roots almost blotted out the sunlight thanks to their immense size, they came spearing down towards the onrushing Rhyperior with the speed and double the striking power of a coiled Seviper. It was too late to dodge. Jason looked unconcerned, even as the most powerful of all grass-type attacks bore down on his Rhyperior. One by one the roots struck Rhyperior, knocking it back with every blow and dealing quite a bit of damage with each hit. Rhyperior grunted with each hit as it held its immense arms in a cross guard in front of its body, lessening some of the damage. To everyone's shock, Rhyperior was still standing tall and strong after the attack ended. The drill Pokémon actually smirked and crushed its fists together, ready for more. Suddenly, it rushed forward again. Still using its augmented speed, it slammed its still glowing hammer arm into the surprised Sceptile's chest with tremendous force. Sceptile went flying and crashed into the stadium's walls, cratering it from the sheer force behind it. Sceptile. Candace cried out in concern. Did you really think it would be that easy? I've raised my Rhyperior's defenses as high as I could with lots of special training. Rhyperior's solid rock ability also comes in handy, of course, Jason said, smirking. Solid rock, that means that the damage of super effective attacks are reduced by a fourth. That Frenzy Plant only did slightly more than regular damage, and by the looks of it the attack wasn't nearly enough to phase Rhyperior, Ash thought, his eyes glued to the battle below. He was trembling excitement. That would be him down there someday. Sceptile shakily pulled itself up and stumbled back onto the battlefield. Taking a deep breath, the lizard-like Pokémon hardened its stance and prepared to continue fighting. Candace's eyes hardened. Keep it away. Frenzy Plant again. Then follow up with Solar Beam. Jason's eyes widened in clear alarm. While those attacks wouldn't do super effective damage because of Rhyperior's solid rock ability, they were still very powerful attacks. One Frenzy Plant wasn't enough to slow down his Rhyperior, but another followed by a Solar Beam might even put Rhyperior out of commission. Quick, use Rock Wrecker. If it survives, finish it with Ice Beam. Jason commanded. There was a tinge of desperation to his voice. Rhyperior roared, shaking the earth thanks to the sheer force behind it, and cupped its gigantic palms. Small chunks of gray stone came out of the holes on Rhyperior's hands and formed together into a large rock that was outlined in red. The red outline faded and Rhyperior reared back, took aim, and launched the stone directly towards Sceptile at an incredible speed. Take that Rock Wrecker and keep on charging Solar Beam. Candace commanded. She hoped that her Sceptile could take the hit. Sceptile nodded and started charging Solar Beam. The bulbs on its back started glowing as they took in sunlight in preparation for the mighty grass-type attack. Meanwhile, the roots of Frenzy Plant that it had summoned mere moments before arched above and around the incoming Rock Wrecker. The gigantic tree roots honed in on Rhyperior and struck the mighty ground and rock type over and over, knocking it back with every hit. Finally, the Rock Wrecker struck Sceptile, creating a mighty explosion. Smoke and sharp chunks of stone billowed outwards. A heavy haze of dirt now obscured the battlefield. It slowly began to lift. Only the area around Sceptile's last known location was still hidden behind a heavy cloud of dust. All was silent for but a moment. All eyes were now glued to the dust cloud hiding Sceptile from sight, waiting to see if the forest Pokémon was able to continue battling. The answer came a moment later in the form of a gigantic solar beam that speared out of the smoke and surged towards the only just recovering Rhyperior. The drill Pokémon quickly opened its maw and started charging an ice beam. Within seconds it had charged the ice beam as much as it could in such a short time frame and unleashed the icy blue zigzagging beam towards the rapidly closing in solar beam. The two attacks met head-on, impacting harshly against each other and for a moment stalemated, but only for a moment. The solar beam overpowered the ice beam, breaking through it and shredding the beam into nothingness. The solar beam struck Rhyperior, actually throwing the immensely heavy Pokémon back and setting it ablaze with white energy as the power of solar beam covered it. Rhyperior fell to its knees, shaking the entire arena, gasping and moaning in pain. The white energy covering it snuffed out after a moment, revealing the black burn mark where the solar beam had struck Rhyperior in the chest. With a grunt of exertion, Rhyperior got back on its feet, although it looked like it would keel over at any moment. The smoke covering Sceptile was swept away in a sudden breeze, revealing the forest Pokémon. Sceptile's entire body was shaking. There were deep cuts all over its green and pink body, and some shards from the rock wrecker had embedded themselves into its skin. There was also one huge bruise on its chest where the rock wrecker had initially struck. The forest Pokémon and the drill Pokémon glared at each other, daring the other to admit defeat. There was another breeze of wind. With a gasp of pain, Sceptile suddenly collapsed, falling face first to the ground in a dead faint. The forest Pokémon was completely knocked out cold. There was a heartbeat of complete and utter silence. The stadium erupted. Everyone was cheering for the trainers and their Pokémon. The crowd cheered, clapped and whistled as hard as they could. Ash and his mother joined in on the cheering and clapping. Sceptile is unable to battle. Rhyperior wins. We have a new guardian for the year, Jason from Kanto. The ref announced as he lifted his flag towards Jason. All right. Jason cheered as he pumped his fist in victory. Rhyperior smirked in satisfaction before Jason recalled it and thanked the drill Pokémon for its efforts. Candace sighed and recalled Sceptile as well. She had a defeated, but satisfied look on her face. She drew herself up and walked across the battlefield to shake Jason's hand and congratulate him on his victory. Jason blushed in light embarrassment and gratefully took the offered hand. The crowd's clapping and cheering took on an even higher pitch at the sportsmanship. That night, several hours later, a large crowd had gathered in the Cameron Palace ballroom. The red marble room was decorated elaborately with tapestries and ancient paintings. The room was packed to the brim with people, who were all still dressed as people out of the medieval era. Only the section of the floor that was used for dancing was free of people. Ash and Delia stood a little to the side, watching Queen Eileen as she got up from her throne and walked forwards. The crowd fell silent as Lady Eileen was given a polished wooden staff. It had metal rings and decorations with a shimmering crystal at the top. Ash was in pure awe of it. She held it out for the crowd to see, who watched the staff with interest and awe. The queen smiled as nostalgia swirled in her eyes. She turned towards Jason. Walking up to him, she held the staff out towards the victor of the tournament. This is the staff of the guardian that once belonged to the great Sir Aaron. According to our tradition, the winner of the Pokemon competition is named the Aura Guardian for the year and is presented with this staff. In behalf of my kingdom, Jason, it's yours. Awesome, Jason breathed in awe as he gingerly took the staff from the queen. This really belonged to Sir Aaron, he said, looking at the deep blue gem on the top of the staff. His question went ignored as the queen continued on with her duty. Now we will begin the grand ball in honor of Sir Aaron and our new guardian. Please, enjoy yourselves everyone, the queen announced and smiled as classic music started playing. Couples swiftly took to the ball floor to dance. Delia smiled at her son and took him to the buffet, which was neatly tucked into the side of the ballroom. Ash nearly started drooling at seeing the large and diverse buffet. His mother giggled at him and patted her child on the shoulder. Go and enjoy yourself, sweetie, but don't overeat. I'm going dancing with that fine young gentleman over there. Ash nodded, not really paying attention to whom his mother was planning on dancing with. He made a beeline for the buffet. Delia smiled one more time at her child's back and turned towards the gentleman who had caught her attention. Half an hour into the celebrations, Ash had finally had his fill. He sagged into his seat and patted his stomach in contentment. He didn't notice the people around him who were staring at him incredulously. They had just witnessed a little boy eat twice his own body weight like it was nothing. It was impossible. Ash stood up from his chair and was about to wander off in search of something else to do until suddenly a glint in the corner of his eyes caught his attention. He turned and spotted the massive gem on the staff in the hands of Jason, who was sitting beside the queen herself. He looked at it curiously. He wasn't sure, but he thought he felt a sort of connection to something inside the gem, or was that just his imagination playing tricks on him? The longer he stared at it, the more there was a nagging feeling in the back of his mind, as if someone was screaming at him from a great distance, but he couldn't make it out. He also felt as if someone was looking right at him. Ash didn't know it, but that someone was actually looking at his aura. Lucario had no idea what was going on. His last memories were of impending doom. Two armies who were dead set on destroying each other were about to wage war on Cameron soil. He had seen them mere moments before they would have met with the incredible sight his aura granted him. The clash would have destroyed their kingdom without question. Then his master had done the unthinkable. His master had betrayed him. Sir Aaron was his master and his teacher in the ways of aura, but he had abandoned him and the kingdom in its hour of need. He had fled the palace, abandoning Queen Rin to her fate and took off on his Pidgeot towards the Tree of Beginning. He had of course chased after his master, thinking and hoping that he had a plan to stop the impending destruction. How wrong he was. The moment he had caught up with Sir Aaron, his master had denounced him as his student and had continued on running. Shocked and confused, Lucario continued to follow his master only for Sir Aaron to turn around and throw his staff down in front of Lucario, where it lodged into the ground. The jewel on top of the staff had glowed brightly and the gem had captured him just like a Pokeball did in the here and now. Not that Lucario knew what a Pokeball was. Or anything about the here and now. The now ancient Pokemon had been sleeping inside the gem for a very long time, held in suspended animation for centuries, unaware of the passage of time outside of his long-time resting place. Nothing had disturbed him, nothing had touched him, and nothing had so much as caught his notice. Until someone with an aura nearly identical to his long-dead master came close enough to rouse him from his forced slumber. Rage, sadness, and betrayal were the first emotions the aura Pokemon had felt in over 700 years. Not that he knew that he had been sealed for over 700 years. Lucario shook his head. He could wallow in his emotions later. First, he needed to free himself. He turned his attention outward, looking for a way to escape. His view from the outside world was blurry at best. He could only see the blue outline of the room that he was in and the inner aura of the people present in the room. It was more than enough, though. His aura sight didn't hone in on the person that was holding the staff of his master, but on a child not far away from him. This child had an aura so closely resembling his master's own that he could have mistaken the child for Sir Aaron if the child wasn't so obviously small. The child even had similar physical characteristics to his master from what he could make out. Did his master have a child? He didn't have some one-night stand with some woman, did he? He wouldn't have even entertained the thought before, but with his master's abandonment and subsequent betrayal he wasn't certain anymore to just what Sir Aaron was capable of. Lucario quickly shunted his thoughts to the back of his mind. He had better things to think about. Like, how to get out of this stupid gem. There was only one way to escape, and he knew how. The staff only reacted to his master's aura. His master wasn't anywhere nearby. Luckily there was someone with a near-identical aura not too far from him who was naturally giving of the needed aura to escape. Hopefully, this would work. No, it had to work. Using his own impressive skills in aura manipulation, he started drawing the ambient aura in the air towards the gem and focused on the young child's aura that had diffused into the air. Little by little he drew the needed aura for him to escape. To his joy he could feel the gem reacting towards the child's aura. He would be free soon enough. The celebrations lasted deep into the night. After one last speech by the Queen at midnight and the setting off a spectacular display of fireworks, the celebrations slowly but surely petered out. Ash and Delia were some of the last people there. It was nearly 2 o'clock in the morning and only about a dozen people remained, including Ash, Delia, the Queen, her maid and Jason. Queen Eileen got up from her throne and approached Jason, who got up from his chair as he saw her approach. She held out her hands. Jason nodded and handed the staff back to the Queen. Lady Eileen turned to address the few remaining people. Another night of celebration in honor of Sir Aaron has come and gone. On behalf of him I thank you for attending and I hope that all of you enjoyed yourselves. With that, I wish you good night. The Queen dipped her head at the last remaining guests. With that the Queen left the room, taking the staff containing Lucario with her, completely unknowing of what she was carrying with her. Damn it. All had been going so well. Just 1 minute more was all he would have needed to escape from the wretched gem that contained him, but it was 1 minute too many. The staff had been taken from the room and Lucario had seen the child leave with his mother. He had been separated from the only chance that he had to escape. He could already feel the gem's power pushing down on him again. It was trying to return him to his forced slumber. No. Lucario raged against his confines, and in a desperate instinctive move he took hold of the child's aura he had been able to pull to himself. Concentrating, he used it to make a protective shell around his sealed form. The aura Pokemon sighed in relief as the pressure abruptly left, as the gem's power could no longer reach him, for the moment. Now what? It was a good question. He didn't have enough of the child's aura to escape, and the child was now too far away from him. He needed the child in order to escape, but he couldn't. Wait, that's not entirely true. There was one technique, a technique that Sir Aaron had taught him mere months before the impending battle that had threatened to destroy the kingdom of Cameron and his master's betrayal. This technique allowed him to make a telepathic connection with anyone with a strong enough aura over great distances. So long as the child hadn't left his range, he could contact him and try to ask for the child's help. There was still hope. This is it. My final chance. Lucario closed his eyes and concentrated. Ash was almost asleep when the mental voice of Lucario barely managed to reach him. His mother had immediately taken the now very sleepy child back to their hotel in Rota the moment the queen had closed the celebrations. He had stayed up way past his bedtime, and while Delia was far more lenient on enforcing bedtime than most parents, she still made sure that Ash received